All right. So what we are discussing. So Indra was asking that do we have any default for the CSS? Do we have any default values when you have an element, right? Um,
Mhm.
so every browser has called this is you see this here called user agent style sheet. Okay, user
Right.
agent style sheet is basically browser's own implementation. So the way it works is CSS by default has its own default. So think of this way. So let's say you have, I'm just going to write it here. So there's a CSS default, okay? And then on the top, you have browser default, okay? This is called user agent uh, style sheet, okay? Now, browser CSS default disregard my spelling. CSS default might be different than browser default, and each browser can have just a little different default. Okay, that's why when you do the testing, you want to make sure that your thing works on all the browsers, and that is because browser default um, can from Firefox to Chrome might be just a little different, and their implementation might be just a little different also. Okay, and that's why we need to do a lot of testing. So going back here, if you see this user agent style sheet, so that's the that's the default that provided by Chrome. Okay, so
Mhm.
for example, div's default is what block, right? Uh, CSS. Let's look at what's a CSS default. CSS display default. I look at it here. Uh,
Line, line.
yeah, it's inline. Did it say inline somewhere?
Yes, the top.
Oh yeah, right here, right? But uh, browser makes it its own, right? So it thinks that a div should have block. So CSS provides pretty much like a default for all the properties, and then browser would provide default for each element. Okay, so you have to look at this, and then sometimes if you look at those like a bootstrap, right? So bootstrap, what they do, they normalize things. So they already know that you have there's a discrepancy between one browser to another, so they fix all those stuff. That's why if you use bootstrap, you get consistency across all the browsers. Okay, now you Indra, you were having difficulty
But
finding
there's
this.
also like
Yeah, go ahead.
there's also something called normalized.css, right? Like to have a consistent CSS around all browsers.
Yeah, you can include the normalized CSS, and that would fix a lot of the problem. But you need to remember that those normalized CSS, you need to use the right version because it's it normalize a particular version, right? So today, if I release a normalized CSS, which fixes right now Chrome, Firefox, and all that stuff. Now, 2 years from now on, all the new features are added, so you have to find a new normalized CSS for that, browser. But yeah, it would include all the older feature as well because, so always find the latest one, normalize. So CSS people know all this stuff, right? That they need to have a normalized CSS in their project. Okay, now do you guys found this filtered place?
Okay, well, actually, try.
Mm. So, are you in the Chrome?
Yes, but I'm Chrome.
Okay. Did you find the border box? So you have to first select an element, right? Did you select an element?
Oh, yes, I did.
Okay, so you have to do select element and then click on it, and then you would see highlighted, and then that means now you're in a selected area.
Okay. Okay, I will try. I'll try once more later, and I will.
How about this, right? After end of this session, we can debug it. So you can, I can give you permission so you can see, I can see your screen, and then we can look at it, right?
Sure.
Okay.
And the further class, maybe in this today's CS class, I will. Can you explain, when to use pixel, when to use percentage, uh,
Okay, sure.
or
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can look. We can do it. But let's start with the homework. Okay. Um, so, and I'm gonna go a little bit over today since I want to spend a little bit more time on this stuff. So, so I think Rama, you submitted the homework, and I looked at it. The only thing is, okay. So here's the one mistake you made, Rama, is that the objective for the change the child name is to actually change the value of the name, not the property name to new name. So I think what you wrote is to change this to new name.
right.
What I asked for is, otherwise I would have done this, right? Name to this. But here you provide um, a value of the new name. So let's say my child here is Peter, right? So what I want to do is, here I would say Peter, and the new name would be, let's say, Kim or something, right? So change the name from Peter to Kim. And in order to do that, so you're what you've done is right for what you thought you should be doing, but here's a solution. So if I go here, first of all, what I need to do, so I need to, because I'm inside this object, uh, I can access the list of children using this keyword, right? So I can say this list of keywords means this guy, okay? And we're gonna look at this keyword today in much more detail. Um, so once I have access to this, because this is an array, right? Because I can have multiple children, more than one child, right? So I can iterate through, because it's an array, I can iterate through using for off loop. And when I do that, I would get access to this name. So I can say if my name equal to the name I'm searching for, which would be Peter. So this is how I call it. You see this? Um, I can change the name from Peter to hi. Okay. So the first argument is Peter, which is a name. So if I would say if my name equal to Peter, then all I need to do is change the name to the new name, which is hi here. Okay. So that's how you change the name, and this is how you call it. So you would say profile 0, because again I gave you a trick, because these profiles have more than one profile, right? So if I want to change the name of John's children, then I have to provide which profile so I need to say profile 0, right? And then dot change name. So I have access to this property, and I'm passing Peter, so I need to change the name of the Peter. The new name should be hi. Okay. When you're adding a new child, which is very easy, actually, you just simply do add a child, provide a profile. Now I'm passing the entire profiles object here, but you can literally pass profile 0 also here, and then use it. Okay, and then it's the same way. You are accessing property of the list of children, and then I am pushing a new value, which is name and age. Okay, so that's how. Any question on this one?
No.
Okay. All right. So, okay, on also on a triangle. Um, how do I get? Okay, CSS homework. So Rama, yeah, your solution is correct. I think basically you just need to, from what we done, um, we need to make the border transparent, and that and then you override it. So the all other border are transparent, and that's how you do it. Okay, so this is correct. And also, I think Indra, you can also, I don't know if when you go in, I'll provide a right solution here, but I think you guys cannot see each other's homework. I'm assuming. Can you?
I didn't
Say it again.
actually I didn't record the page.
Oh, okay, okay.
I didn't try to homework.
Oh, okay. I'll provide. I'll yeah. So yeah, Rama's what he provided was correct. So you can try, and then do you want me to post the answer after that, or what do you want to do, Indra?
Yeah, I will try to submit by end of the day.
Okay, all right. So yeah, then I'll post the final version of it. Yeah. Okay. I know it was a short week because we met on what, Wednesday, right? So yeah.
Actually, I'm with my release work, so I couldn't.
Oh no, that's fine. We all busy, right? So as long as I what I want to do is at least try it, so that learning is important. But I think if you don't try, then it doesn't really, your brain doesn't really get it until you actually try it. So I would suggest that you would try as much as you can. Okay. All right. So today let's start with functions. Okay, so I think we are getting into a little bit advanced. I'm gonna try to cover some of the advanced topics. Okay. Functions.
Uh,
Yeah, go ahead.
I have one.
Yeah.
I have shared you an JS library. The thing is, if you add the JS field, it shows the console in the result, like the output box itself.
Do you know? Yeah, I saw your thing, but I'm trying to think. Where do you just can you include it here? Or resource here?
Yeah, just paste the link there.
Okay. Okay. Let me try that. Hold on. This is mine. Hey, by the way, thanks for letting me know. Yeah, that guy was copying my stuff. It was, I don't know. Some people. All right. All right. So now I guess if I,
I think it's valid.
oh, that's nice. Cool. Yeah, this is really cool. Okay. Um, this makes my life much easier. Thank you. All right. Okay, so functions, right? Um, there are three kinds of functions. The one function that I would suggest never to use is, the function like a JavaScript, Java style functions, where you would do something like this. 1, 2, right? Never use this kind of function. This is called function declaration. Why we should not use this function? Does anybody know this? Because these functions are hoisted. We looked at this in the first class. Because if I just do add, let's say 1, 2, let's see if I console log it here. One plus two. I should not say 1 plus 2. There should be x, y. Okay, I'm getting 3, even though the definition is after I execute the function. So this is a problem, and we should not. That's why we should not use function declarations. Instead, I would want to use function expression. So what's the difference? Function expression is, I should not say add, this would be called function. So this is called anonymous function, that the function doesn't have a name. So if I just do this, this is called anonymous function, right? So if I save a function in a variable, I should always use const add equal to, then I am then any variable scope is automatically applies to this function, right? So the variable, they don't exist before its definition, at least if I use like a let and const, right? So now if I run this, it won't work, right? And that is because it doesn't exist before its definition. So always use function expression. Even more better, always use arrow function. So what is an arrow function? I can do this way. Arrow function is, too easy to remember the syntax, remove the function and just use this xy. Okay, and after this you just need to add an arrow and then the definition like this. Okay, this is called an arrow function. We're going to look at this in detail, but I would suggest try to use arrow function as much as possible. And here you would just simply do this. Well, let me put this here after now and then comment this out. Okay, then I get 3. An arrow function, you don't even have to I think you can just simply do, hold on, I think you can simply, if it's a one line, you can simply do this. And then you don't really have to return anything. Okay. So arrow functions are really cool. The difference between function expression and arrow function is they don't have, arrow functions don't have this, its own this. We're gonna look at the this keyword now, but this is the most important thing. Okay. That's why we need to use arrow function. Now there are cases where you want to use this. Then you wanna think about it. Okay. But most of the time you don't want to use this. The only time you want to use own this is if you are building a constructor. Okay. So, and we're gonna look at this in a moment. So what is this keyword that we use? Remember last time we looked at the objects, right? Let me clean this up. We looked at the object. So let's say if I have a constant x or profile, inside I can have some property called x, or age is, let's say 10, and I can have a function inside here. There are 2 ways to do it. I can write get age like this and have a function, and this would hold on, I typed too fast. Okay, and then return this dot h. So this here means my immediate object. So what is my immediate object? That is profile. So now from inside this function, I can access the property of this profile, right? And so that's what this means. I can also, I don't really have to do this anymore. Inside, if I'm using inside the object, I can simply do this, get age. This is a new syntax. Okay, this means I'm using a method. So if I do profile dot get age, this should give me 10, right? Okay. Now, if I use, let's say, an arrow function here, what do you think I would get? Anybody has any idea? Okay, let's try this. Yeah, go ahead.
Undefined?
Yep. So it's giving me undefined. Remember I said it doesn't have its own this. Usually what happens when you have a function, right? When you run a function, it has its own this. In this case, and this is very important to understand, In this case, when I just simply have a method this, which means this really means the object I am inside, okay, which means profile. So this here, this means profile, okay. If I write just a separate function, let's say const get age equal to function, so this is a function expression, and if I do something like this, now here what is this really means? So regular function, because it's not attached to any other object, it doesn't really know what this means. And it's kind of illegal. Okay. In old days, it used to give an error if I do something like this. In the new, I think it gives you undefined or something. I forgot what error it gives you, but you know, you don't have any this here. Okay. But if I use an arrow function here, which means I don't have my own this, so what it will do, it will borrow this from outer scope. Okay. And I think in this case, if I just do this, and run this, oh, I have to actually run the get age, right? It gives me window, means it's giving me global scope, right? Because it doesn't have its own this. So arrow function always, because it doesn't have its own this, it doesn't have a problem using this, but it would say, okay, you know, I don't have it, let me look it outside the scope, and it would just use the one out from outside. Okay. But if I have a function, then function expression, then it would say, okay, you know, I don't really have my own this, so it would give you an error or undefined. So let's just do this. Let's see what function. I think it should not give it this. Let's just look at the real console. Okay, it gives some error. I don't know what the... Okay. Yeah, I think this, you have to be really careful when you use it. Inspector inside like this, because it does, it's inside an iframe, so it would do some funky stuff. Okay, let me open inside a Chrome and try to do that, the same thing. Hmm. It's also giving window somehow. Oh, yeah, I know why. You should always do use strict. If I use that, because if it's a loose mode, then it gives me window, but it should use strict mode. Okay, now it's giving me undefined, you see. So yeah, you have to, well, let's try this in the, here if I use a strict mode here. Do you know what strict mode is? Does anybody know what the strict mode is? So strict mode is basically, um, if you look at it, so there are lots of things that you used to do in older version of JavaScript, right? Strict mode means um, you can't do those anymore um, because it creates problem, right? So for example, if I do I equal to 1, oh my god, I just JS filler is crazy. It hiding and then the top of it. Okay, hold on. Let me open in another window. So strict mode is basically, so let's say if I do this, I equal to 5. Okay. In the regular mode, it would not have any problem. But if I say use strict, well, let me use inside here in the Chrome. I haven't defined I yet, right? So see, it says I is not defined. But if I remove the strict mode, then it would not have any problem. Okay, yeah, so some of the stuff, it doesn't work in that other extension. Yeah, see, it doesn't give me any problem here. So anyway, so in the Firefox, ignore, some stuff won't work, I'm assuming, because of that. Okay, so strict mode is basically if you make a lot of silly mistakes, like if you don't define a variable, I'm supposed to use like let here, right? But I didn't use it. If I don't use let for defining a variable and assign a value directly, then strict mode would basically say, no, you made a mistake. You know, I will give you error. So a lot of times, if you're using React or Angular, you would they run in strict mode, so they won't allow you to do all kind of silly mistakes. Okay. Um, so the same thing with the this thing. If I use this inside a function like this, and if it's not a constructor, if it's a regular function, then strict mode would basically prevent me from doing it. So it would give you an error. Or in this case, it's giving me undefined, but I think the previous version of Chrome used to give an error, but now it doesn't somehow. But basically, it doesn't respect this inside a function. Now, arrow function is different, as I said. It doesn't have its own this, so it will basically simply borrow it from outside scope. Okay, so that's that. So far, so good. Anybody have any questions?
ML.
Sure.
Then how to access the variable when using arrow function here?
Where exactly?
I mean, like instead of get age here, if you use the arrow function here,
Yeah.
so you're saying just we need to write return age in an arrow function to access the variable.
Are you talking
Age.
about inside inside the object, or just the one that I define outside?
That object.
Oh, inside the object. So do not use arrow function as an object method. That's what I'm saying. If you use it, it won't work, right? If I do get age as this, it won't work, right? Because it's not now binding to the property object. Okay, so if I do console log profile.getAge, then this keyword here, it's not binding to the profile. So if I run this, I get undefined. I was supposed to get 10, right? I get undefined. So that's a one rule. Don't use arrow function as object method. Got it? You use it as a regular function, but not as a method.
Actually, like in Ajax calls, when using observables,
Yeah.
we will use the arrow function to get the response of a call, Ajax call.
Yes.
So okay.
Yeah, but it's not an over there. You would notice that it's not it's just a regular method, a regular function. They're not objects method.
Yes, I got it.
Right? So
Yes,
this is
got
an
it.
objects method. So this is an object and this is its method. So using arrow function as an objects method is a big no. A lot of people would use this here and then they have no idea what's going on because it doesn't have its own this, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, let's do an experiment. For example, if I if I do a function here. So now here we already know that if I do return this dot age, it works, right? We already know this. So if I run this, it would give me 10. Now let's do an experiment here. I'm gonna create another function inside called a regular function. Okay, I'm just gonna say inner get age. Okay, and this function, what it does, it would simply do the same thing. It would say return this dot age, right? And so is it safe to say that if I run this function inner get age, what would I get? I would get this dot age, right? Which I can again return, which would be the return of get age, right? So I can do return. So when I execute this function, it would return this, and then this I can return for the get age. Everybody got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so now we have a problem here. If I run this, what would I get? All right, let's run it. I get nothing. Why? Well, don't trust this console completely because when it gets nothing, then there is a problem. But it's not giving us a right result. Rama?
No, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, do you know why is it happening?
Maybe age is not defined.
No. So, again, I want to focus on this. This is like creator of a lot of issues. Um, if you're doing React or Angular or any of that, if you don't understand this keyword, it can create a lot of problems. That's why I want to go slowly because now we're getting into this advanced territory, right? So inside inside this function, get age. Okay, we already know that this dot age exists, right? Because we already returned it, it works fine. Okay. However, remember I told you that function expression has its own this, and it doesn't really know it, so it won't take anything from outside its scope. So here, this dot age is 10, but inside here, this is confusing because it doesn't really know what's right, because it's not supposed to have its own this. So this is not 10. So what it's returning is undefined. It returns undefined for, so when I execute inner get age, this would give me undefined, and so this one returns undefined for get age. Okay, so that's a problem. How do you solve this problem? Um, you can do this way. You can say that let that equal to this, and then I can say that age. So I created a new variable called that, and by lexical scoping it's automatically available inside here, right? And now I'm returning this, so that would be this profile, and profile.age is 10, so we will return this 10 for this function, which would return here, and then get age. Okay, so if I run this, now I'm getting 10. Got it? So this is a solution. If you're using a regular function, do not use this inside unless it's a constructor. We're gonna cover the constructor much later, but regular function expression, you don't want to use this inside. Okay, we don't really have to do this if I use an arrow function here, which is now I can use, because remember, arrow function doesn't have its own this, so it will say whatever this is outside, I'm just gonna use this. So now if I run this, it gives me this. Okay, everybody clear on this? Because this keyword is very important, and I think if you understand this, then your Angular React programming becomes very easy.
So function expression doesn't have its own this, right, Hamid?
No, that's what I'm saying. Function expression does have its own this, but it's not bound to anything. So it won't take any this from outside.
Okay.
So using this inside a function expression, if it's not a constructor, then it's an invalid thing to do. Because it's confused, like what is this inside a function expression? It doesn't really know what it is, right? But if you use an arrow function, then arrow function knows that, okay, I don't have my own this, I'm just gonna borrow from outside.
Okay.
Got it? So function expression has its own this, but it doesn't know what it is because you haven't really said anything.
So it is bounded to that block, right?
Yes. Yeah. So or for function expression, this is bound to itself. And we haven't really defined what this age is inside the function expression. So it doesn't really know what it means, right? So that's why JavaScript thought it's illegal to use this if you haven't defined it. But function, but the arrow function, we already know that this is coming from outside of the scope. So it's if you use it here outside, then it would be window. If I'm using inside this get age, then whatever this belongs to get age is, it will be this. So inside here, it's profile is this object. So if I simply do this console log this, it would give me profile. Right? It gives me the profile object. Right? So yeah, it's very important to understand this keyword. And as we go along, I think if you have any questions on, that's why you want to use, so the two rules, right? You don't want to use arrow function as a method for an object, but everywhere else you want to use arrow function as much as possible. So what I'm saying is, don't even use function expression from now on unless you are using a constructor. So always use arrow functions everywhere. And method is not a function expression. Method is just a method, right? So try to use as much as function expression, then as much as the arrow function, so you don't get in this trouble. And you already know, if you're using Angular, you're already using lots of arrow functions, right? So okay. All right. Now let's move to the rest default parameters. Okay, any question on this again? All right. Yeah.
So in JavaScript, what is the difference between a method and a function?
A method is attached to an object, right? So inside here, get age is a method, right? Because if I want to access it, I have to say profile.getAge, right? Function is, I can just execute it like this.
So method binds to an object.
Yes. Yeah, so like a Java, you have a method, right? Object method. So you have the object properties and the object methods. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's look at the next. Um, it's called default parameters. So usually, if I let's say const. So again, make a habit of using as much as arrow function as possible, unless you are using an object method where you don't want to use arrow function. Okay. An arrow function is also called fat arrow because the it's not a regular arrow, it's like a fat arrow. Okay. So now let's say if I have an add equal to a function. From now on, I'm gonna use mostly arrow functions, right? So that you also get in the habit of it. If you go for an interview, again, if you use an arrow function and if you know what exactly it does, then they would think that okay, you know your stuff very well, right? If you start like a function declaration, they know that you're coming from like old school, you don't know, you haven't done any recent programming. Okay. So in old days, if I do something like this, um, so I have a function add, and I'm not actually providing any arguments. And when I execute it, I'm providing 2 arguments. How would I access it inside without any arguments? Anybody got any ideas?
Can you repeat the question again, Heman?
Okay, so I have a function called add, right? And as you can see, there is no arguments in the body of this function. But let's say when I execute this function, I'm providing 2 arguments. I want to access it inside the add, these 2 arguments, but I do not want to I don't want to do something like this. Okay, how do I access these arguments inside the body of the function?
Using spread operator arguments.
Arguments. Yes, spread operator would be an argument itself, right? You can use spread operator, but it would be an argument. But I don't want to use an argument. I just want to not pass anything because I don't really know what my user can pass. Because user can pass 3 or an empty array or something, right? And I want to catch all of this. So there is in JavaScript inside there is an argument object. Okay, so if I console log this, and run it, all right, this is where this
You can just use your normal console.
oh, it gives this load here. Okay, let's use a normal console. Okay, you can see that there is an argument object here, and which is what gives you the value. Actually, they have changed a little bit. They used to be, I think because they constantly are updating um, So they actually have changed a little bit. I see that. All right. Um, but you can see it's not an array, right? You would assume that this would be an array. What you can do is arguments. Oh. I think something like this. Is it arguments or it is arguments, right? Oh, you know what? My bad. Arrow function doesn't have arguments. That's why. If I have regular functions, that's why you get into good habit of not using all the bad stuff. So arguments is kind of like an old JavaScript, but I just wanted to show you how. So now if I have, let's say, okay, you would see like 1, 2, 3 an array, right? But this is not an array because it doesn't have a lot of other array property. So there is a way to actually convert this. So if you take an array, it has a slice property you can call something like this. I think it works. Then it converts into an array. Or I think you can do something like this. You can use a straight square operator. By the way, don't use arguments ever again. I just want to show you what's available. It does the same thing, right? So that's why I always want you to use. So if you, because then you cannot use arguments. It would give you some weird stuff, right? Okay, so now let's say if I have x and a y, and I want to add them here, right? I can say console log x plus y. Okay. So now I get 3. What if I don't pass any arguments? What would happen? Anybody know? Yes, because it doesn't really know what x is and y is, right? And so they're both undefined. So you get not a number because you're trying to add to things that are not numbers. So undefined plus undefined is not a number. It tries to convert into numbers. So in this situation, you want to provide some default value, right? One way to do it is this. You can say if, and this is the old way to do it, right? I'm going to show you how to do it. If x equal to undefined, then what you want to do? Then you want to say x equal to 0. And the same way you want to do for y. This is an old way to do it. So now if I run this, getting, oh, it needs to return x plus y.
Run console logger.
My bad. All right. Instead, I can simply do this. Right? What does it mean? This means it's the same thing as I did before. It means a default value. If I don't provide any values, then consider it at 0. But let's say if I do provide it, then consider the value that I'm passing. So then it would give me 3, right? What if I don't provide one value? By default, if I do this, that means it's always a first value. So x is 1, and then y is going to be 0. What if I want to say, I don't want to have a, what if I want to pass y here, but no x? Anybody know how to do that?
Undefined comma.
Yeah. Yeah, so you do it undefined, let's say 1. So you really have to provide a value for x in this, which is undefined. Okay, so this is nice, but let's say if I have something like an object, okay, I can also do this. Let's say if I'm expecting this to be an arrays, then I can simply do this, right? Means merge two arrays. It's like adding two arrays, right? So here I can have, if I don't do anything, then what it does, it gives me, you know, it try to concat, push kind of empty array into empty array, which is an empty array. But if I do, let's say 1, and the second array is like 2, and then run it, then I get 1, 2. Okay, so this is a default parameters. Any question on this one? All right, so the spread operator. Let's say we go 5 more minutes before moving to CSS. I know we're gonna take a little bit longer today because we started a little late. Is that fine, everybody?
Yes,
okay, all right. So the spread operator. So let's say in this case, instead of arguments, I can simply do spread operator, right? Which means this is giving me an array. So inside, if I just simply console log A, then it would give me array of arrays, right? I have two. I don't really need this console log. Well, I just need to do A. Okay, I get arrays of an array because A is nothing but A's first element is this, second is this. Okay. Um, so if I do return A0, which means it will give me this, right? And A1, this would give me this. I can also have a fixed parameter. So, but always when you want to have a fixed parameter, you want to do it first, right? So if I have an X and a spread operator, which means X I would get a specific X. So instead of returning here, if I just simply do console log X, let's remove this console log. This would give me 1, and the spread operator would give me 2. And if I console log the second one, because A gives me an array, the spread operator is nothing but give me an array inside. Okay, so I get two things. This, which is that array, and this would be this array, right? This is an array of array, so it would give me an array of array. Here it just gives me an array. Okay, any questions so far? We can stop here, and then I'm gonna go a little bit detail in spread operator next time, since we don't have a lot of time. But why do you want to do, why you don't want to do this?
Because all the arguments are passed to A.
Yeah, so it doesn't really know. So anything that is fixed, you want to pass first, right? And then say rest of the argument is put them in this array, right? So it's always good to have if the fixed argument first, and then put the spread operator at the end. Okay. Any questions so far on this one? All right. Is this too fast, by the way?
It's fine for me.
Okay, good. Okay. And feel free to, just if you have any questions, feel free to message me, if you have any questions, right? Let's say if you're doing some sample and then you get stuck, just message me so that, you get cleared. Otherwise, it will become, instead of just getting confused, just ask me. But first, always try to find out yourself. And I think this discovery process always gives you more information. When you find something by yourself, it always gives you more insight because you have to try different things, right? And absolutely, like, okay, I can't figure this out. Let me ask for help. And I would suggest that do a lot of these exercises, and to so that you understand, especially this keyword, okay, because it's so important. And also another thing I wanted to ask you guys was, Now that I think we are at a point where we can start a project, okay? Because learning all this in isolation works, but if you don't have a project, then I think it becomes difficult to overall learn something. So what I want you to do, you guys, is create a project, and it doesn't matter which language you use. You can use Angular, React, Ember. I don't know a lot of. I don't know Vue that much, but if you feel, if you want to create project in Vue, that's fine as well. But I know three. Ember, um, Angular, and React. Um, and let's come up with exactly the same design. So both of you work on the same stuff, so that we can compare. Let's say if you one picks React and one picks Angular, then but the requirement should be the same, so we can see the same things, right? So we can actually discuss. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good idea.
Absolutely.
Okay. And also you can apply, I guess you can apply the CSS work as well on that, because then you really have to build a user interface and apply all the functions or arrays, whatever you learned there, right? Because I feel like now the next few topics we're gonna go into like a, deeper into like a callback functions, promises, um, and much deeper. I think those you really need a project to work on. Okay. What I'll do is I'll come up with some requirements, a small project, okay, which which is not bad, uh, to work on. And what language do you guys prefer? I mean, framework.
I can go with Angular for now.
Okay. What about Indra?
I can work on Angular for ML.
And both of you have experience in Angular?
No, I have like Angular 1, but I'll try Angular 4.
Okay. What about Indra?
I don't have any JS experience, ML, but I'm doing Angular 4 from a couple of months.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Hey, Indra. I mean, Rama. I think if you want to do a React, that's
totally fine with any.
How about you do React?
Because I've not touched Angular 4 or React.
Yeah, I think, and Indra would would agree with this, that it's a little bit of a beast, Angular 4. So I would suggest let Indra do the Angular, and if you both want to do React, is fine as well. Okay, but the reason I want you to, Rama, I want you to do React is, if you haven't done uh, both either, then React is easy to catch.
Okay.
Okay. And
is there any specific version of React?
React 16.
16. Okay.
Yeah. And also another important thing in the React is all pure JavaScript. So anything that we do, it will be very useful in the React. Angular doesn't use a lot of pure JavaScript. It has its own a lot of syntax, right? So, but since Indra is doing Angular, I think he should. Again, it's your choice, Indra. But since you're doing it, would help you with your project, right? But if you want to go React way, feel free. I'll teach you some basics, and you can get started. Okay.
Sure.
Thanks, Emma.
Yeah. And what I'll do, I think, Rama, is I'll give you. I have a couple of React initial tutorial. You watch it, and then if you have any question, let me know. They're very simple tutorials, and if you guys want, I can have one session where I can get you up to date with React. And if you want to go with Angular, I can do the same thing. I can spend maybe like a 1 hour or so like on a weekdays to get you prep on the framework, and then you can go off and work on it. Okay.
Sure.
All right. So next time I will build a design. Next homework, I will give you on a specific framework. Okay. Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right. Cool. All right. So let's move to the CSS. And okay. So how familiar you guys with the display property?
Display with non-block and inline stuff.
Yeah, inline and inline block. Okay, so I think, I mean, there, even though you probably used it, but I think it's very important to actually understand it because in detail. Okay, so let's start from there, and I might be able to cover one more property, but let's start with the display. Okay, and maybe next time we'll spend a little bit more time on CSS. All right, so let's do it here. So let's say if I have a div with class A and I have another div with class B and I have another div with class C, okay? And they all have like A, B, and C. Let me do A, B, B, and C, C, so at least a little bit bigger, right? So render it, it gives you this. If you look at this, they are actually stacked on each other. They're like always on top of each other, like stacks, right? And as we looked at the last time, one way to style it is using, I can do, since they all have a different class, I can do this. Right, and I can say border is 1 pixel, solid, and red. Okay, so it gives me this. Again, as I said, by default, if you are using div, then its display property is block. Okay, and if I'm using span, for example, and I say hi, let's say if I do 2 spans. As you can see, spans are next to each other, but div, they are on top of each other. And that is because div has a display property of block. And if you were a kid, as a kid, if you probably played with blocks, that's why they call blocks. So if I look at one of those properties, and it said by default, it says, you see the user agent style sheet, it's by display is block, right? On the other side, if I use hi, and if you look at the display, it's inline. Because span, we use it in as a text, right? We're gonna look at it in a minute, but span is inline and div is block. So if I use a section, so this is one of the interview questions. So they would ask you, what are the block elements in HTML? So you can say div. I think most of them are blocks. I think if you like do section, right? But if I have two sections, what is this section? Section is if you have a paragraph, you have sections, right? So if I want to look section, and display is inline. Oh, did I spell correct? No, it's actually section. Yeah, that's why. Let's say session. This is supposed to be a block anyway. It's a block. Okay, so it's a block. Okay, so here you can actually look at what are the block properties. So article, these are all blocks. Article, aside, footer, header, group, main, nav. These are all display blocks. And there are some more also. So each element, you can actually look at it and figure out what is what, right? And so the block takes the entire width of the page. What about the height? Height is based on the font, and then it has some padding on the top and bottom, right? So here, but that's just for anything, right? So if I look at the height of A, then the font size is 16, but it has like 2 pixel, right? That's why it's, but height is 516, which is the size of the window. Okay, so that's the property of block. I can actually change this to display inline block. Okay, let's see what happens. Let me remove this high and sections from here. Okay, now what happened really? Since I made it an inline block, they would, instead of stacking on each other, they are side by side now. But one important thing you notice, because they're side by side, they cannot take the entire length of the div, right? Because they won't fit otherwise. So the width now is the width of the content itself, right? So if I, for example, if I just remove AA from here, it doesn't have any width. You can see just a dot, right? So width is a width of the content itself now. We can look at it. And again, this is very important to actually understand in detail so that when you start building your layouts, it would be very helpful. Okay, so if you look at the width is 14.203, that's basically the width of the AA, right? And then height hasn't changed. It's the same, the font size plus that 2 pixel extra, right? Now I can actually change its height and width. I can say height is, let's say, 20 pixels, and width is 20 pixel or something like this, right? Now, as you can see, it has changed. Okay. Well, let's just a little bit more. Let's say 200 and 200. That's visible. Okay. Something else you noticed is that when I do that, what happens? It collapses. So if I expand, so if my width of the entire content is, let's say, 600 pixels, then it would fit. But as soon as I collapse, if I start collapsing, they would actually, the last one would come down here and then like that. So it would basically collapse, like it would stack on each other now, and in that order, like A, B, C. Okay, because it doesn't have enough space to fit all of them in here, so it's doing it right now. There are a lot of ways to control it and all that. I'm not going to go into that, but I just want to know, I want to show you how they behave without any other properties applied around it, right? So this is the behavior of inline block. So they stay inline. Their width, by default, their width and height is the width and height of the content. And if they're not gonna fit in the width of your view, then they're gonna stack. So the last one come out and stack, and then as you reduce the width, then it would stack. Any question on this so far?
No.
Okay. All right, good. Okay, so the next is display inline. Okay, let's see. What do you think would happen here? Anybody knows? Let's say if I just simply change the width and height is 200 and everything is like this. What do you think would happen? Just can you guess? All right. So display inline is used mostly for your text. So if I'm writing something like this, a paragraph, these are the text. So if I wanna write something like for each text, I wanna use display inline. You know why? Because I don't really care about the height. So if I change this, let's say, and if I run it now, so I already changed the display inline. Okay, what really happened? It's now like a regular text. It doesn't really care about the height or width, because inline means text. Remember, the other two are blocks. Blocks mean it should have height and width that you can give, and it should change, right? But inline means just simple text. So now that's why the span is an inline element. So usually, remember, if I'm writing something like this and I can write span inside something, right? And here I would simply say, let's say class equal to D or something, right? Because I want this text to be, let's say, red. Then I would do dot D color red. So what it would do the text around black, and then the one that I put in is basically red. So that's the use of span. So inline element is also, it's basically used for things like this, anything that is textual. Okay. With the block, you can also give width. So if I change this to block, now what happened? They are stacked, but it has a width. If I take the width, and it took the height as well. But if I take the width out, then it takes 100%, right? Yeah, why is it not taking? Oh, block. Yeah, it takes 100%, right? There's a little delay. Okay. So you can control the height and width of the block, but inline element, they don't have any. Okay. If you want to know more about, you can always, if you inspect the element, and where did that go? If I go here, um, so here if I do display, and then it would give you all the options. So you have block, there's a WebKit block. So in old days, different browser used to have its own block, and so WebKit is, since Chrome uses WebKit, that's why it's a specific to Chrome. But it actually collects all the old styles as well. So do not use some of this. So you have a block, you have content, flex. We'll go into flex box. You have a grid, inherit, initial, inline. We looked at the inline block, and then this one we're gonna look at later on, inline, when we cover the flex box. Um, then old days we used to have tables. Um, I would highly suggest don't use tables unless you have to. Okay, so let's cover none. Do you know what none means?
Hiding the content from the user.
Not only hiding the content, but also as if like it doesn't even exist.
Yeah,
So
like shrinking the space.
yeah, it doesn't hold its a space. So if I do display none, means, well, all of them are gone, right? There is no reserved space for now. This stuff actually took its place, right? Um, but if I do, instead of this, let's just keep this block, and instead if I do, let's say, visibility, I think hidden. Let me check if that's the right syntax. Yeah, you see, it's almost like it's there, but it's like it has some sort of an invisible cloak. It's occupying its space, but you cannot see it. That's why you see the bottom. You have this, right? But display none means like as if it doesn't even exist.
Can we use opacity like 0 or something?
Yeah, opacity is similar to visibility, right? Is it a city? It's a similar to visibility, because when you do 0 means, okay, it's like a hidden, right? But it's there. But now if you increase opacity, it would basically come back alive. But 0 means hidden. Yeah. So you can use so it's a very important interview question, which is, I think I would say 50% of the interview, people ask me this question. What's the difference between visibility, hidden, and display none? Okay. Opacity 0 and visibility hidden is almost the same. And let's see, I think visibility, let me see. So visibility has these many. So visible is by default, it's visible, right? Why would you wanna ever set visible? It's because, let's say if you do visibility none, visibility hidden, then you wanna switch back and forth. Like if you have some sort of toggle button, either you can just simply remove the visibility hidden property, or you can just switch it. Does anybody know what initial means? You would find it pretty much everywhere. Okay, so initial means, let's say if I change the property of something to something else, now I don't know what was before, right? Otherwise, you have to remember what was before. So if you say initial, means what was before by default. So you don't have to remember what was the default property. You just simply say initial, means it would just go back to what was before. Okay. Inherit means inherit your parent's property. Means if your parent is visible, then you'll be visible. If your parent is invisible, you'll be invisible. Actually, I don't know what collapse is. I've never used it. I don't know what it did, but yeah, I've never used it. But you can try it out and try to understand, all of it. But some of them probably doesn't make sense because some of them like old property that nobody uses anymore. So we have to be careful, right? What you use. Okay. So yeah, so initial is basically what was there before. Okay. Since we don't have a lot of time, let's just to cover one thing and before we do you know what line height means? Does anybody know what line height means?
No.
Okay. So one of the important property, and again, these are the things that you need to like a lot of practice a lot, and unless you use it on a project, all this would go away. Believe me. That's why I want you to build a project. So you can learn this in isolation, but you really have to use it in a project. That's why I'm thinking of giving you a project. You already have some of the tools to use, and I'll give you a little complex project in a visually so you can actually play around with it. Okay. So you would learn. So line height is basically, let's say if you have, let me just remove this here. Okay. So right now A is here, right? I want to center A in the middle. How do I do that?
Text align something.
Let's try. So these are very important things because text align center. That does a horizontal. I want the vertical centering.
Vertical align maybe.
So vertical align, it doesn't really work. Let me see. You know what? I usually do it in the, not the vertical align. There is like something else. I forgot. But here, if you do it, it will help you. Okay, vertical align it is, and it has middle. Okay, but does it work? No, it won't work. You know why? Because It only works if it's a part, if you have another block inside a block. Okay, but if you have a, if you're, it's not gonna middle your content. So if you want to middle the content, this one works on a table. Okay, if I do, I think display table, table cell. I forgot. I don't use tables. Table row, I think. No. Anyway, I'm not gonna do table. Block. So I think what you need to do is text align center. Obviously, you would do it horizontally, and then you would need a line height. And it has to be same as the height of your content. So what is a line height? So now in that sense, so line height, so your text, that your content, right, your text inside your block, it has a specific height, right? By default it's automatically centered anyway, right? But it just basically your font size and plus 2 pixels, one at the top and one at the bottom, right? But if you increase that line height, it will automatically center itself. Okay, so if somebody asks you how to center the text, which is very important, right? You have to do it in a lot of the cases. This is the only way. Line height equal to the height of your content or your block, right? And then text align is center would, so they're both used for the text aligning center, right? Yeah. If you want to use that vertical align, you have to use, it has to be inside the table or something, yeah. Okay, any questions?
No.
Okay, all right, so I think, yeah, we are almost there. If you have any questions overall, and yeah, Indra, you wanted to show me that you needed to see that filter, right? So we can work on it to find out where to get the filter at, showing.
Actually, right.
You got it?
Yes, I got it, but it's not, the bottom of the box model. It's by side.
Oh, it's on the side. Oh, okay. So maybe I think, yeah, you can actually move things around, and maybe
Okay.
that's what happened. Like I think, yeah, I think it depends on your also width. It actually kind of, does it like this. So you probably have it something like this, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So
I
if
think
you,
the size. Yes.
yeah, if you expand it, then, yeah, do it like this. Okay. And also for the homework, what I'll do is I will create a small project, and I'll give you like a requirement, right? Okay, and you can use whatever knowledge you have so far, and try to find things out by yourself. It won't be too complex, so you can just do initial framework, and then you can use React or Angular, whichever you want to use, to do the JavaScript part. Okay, and when we learn the promises, we'll take care of the data, right? How do we get the data from the server, and all that stuff. So I'll give you just a requirement for initial framework, and then we will add more requirement as we go along so we can use it. Okay, because it doesn't make sense to give a CSS homework by itself, because you would learn and then you would forget about it, right? Small, like building triangles. Yeah, it works, but if I ask you like 10 days later, how do you do it? You would have completely forgotten about it, right? But if you keep working on the same project, you would remember it. So that's the most important thing. Okay. And I'll probably give it to you. I'm still building. I have some requirement, so I'll probably give it to you by end of tomorrow. Okay. And in meanwhile, Rama, if you can go through few, um, at least a setting up a React project.
Okay.
Okay. Let me show you.
And do you have any playlist on your YouTube account for
Yeah.
React?
Yeah. Hold on. I think I do somewhere. Hold on. Yeah. Do you know how to install Node on your computer?
Yeah, I have Node on my computer.
Oh, okay, okay. Um, yeah, I think I do. Okay, yeah, I have the React from scratch. I'll send you. I'll email you this. Okay, and it's in that order, so you can actually. Um, so if you can do, at least if you can do first three, that would be good enough for your to build a project for now.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and they're like a 10 minutes each, so maybe four also if you can do. Yeah. And then if you have any question, just send me it. And then we can have a separate session also with Indra, you also, if you want to learn. I think it's React is really great. And I can have, you can also do it. And then what I'll do one of the weekdays, maybe not this week, but week after that, we can do like a 1 hour session on React. So if you have any questions or concerns, I can address it, and we can look at your project that you're working on, and we can fix things inside.
Sure.
Okay.
So do you do in React instead of Angular 4? Because I haven't done any JS frameworks earlier, even jQuery and all. This is my first, front end work which has assigned.
How about Indra? Then how about you do React as well? I feel like React it's like really built for JavaScript, right?
I want to enhance my JS skills. So better, even it's good to work on React JS.
Yeah, because it's React is all pure JS, pretty much.
Yeah.
Right. So you can use all the arrow functions and function inside function, all kind of stuff you can use in React. Angular limits you, because Angular you have to work within, it has its own syntax and all that stuff.
So Angular have like TypeScript, or is it like JS?
So TypeScript is nothing but, you can use TypeScript in React as well, but I would say don't bother with the TypeScript. Okay. React uses what is called JSX, which is very simple actually. JSX is nothing but like an HTML that gets converted into JavaScript. Okay.
Okay.
But ultimately, everything is JavaScript in React. Okay, pure JavaScript. So you don't have a lot of special keywords. Like I know, Indra, if you look at like input, you have like a decorators in Angular, right?
Yes, input, output, view, child,
Yeah, you don't use any decorator, because decorators are not pure JavaScript, because it's not in the JavaScript yet. Actually, it will be soon, but it's not still in the JavaScript. But React doesn't use all of that. You don't need input, output. So syntax is very simple. You can learn React, I would say, in a month or two maximum. Okay.
So how DOM works in React? Because in Angular, it is, it's different. We use directives and all. So do we have?
No, we don't have any
Same
directives. It's very simple. You write like a regular functions, which are called React objects. Okay, and there is a concept called virtual DOM. Okay, and what it does actually is if you make any changes to a particular field, it basically updates that virtual DOM and then replaces the entire DOM, um, like the DOM of your browser, right? So it keeps a separate DOM which it updates and then replaces the entire DOM. Okay.
Okay.
So it's actually very neat concept. And if you know React, the next thing you can do is if you wanna, let's say if you wanna go into like a building like a phone application, like iOS, like a iOS application or Android application. Nowadays, you don't even have to learn the Objective C or what is the other language, Swift or Java. What you can do if you know React, you can just use React to build. There's a framework called React Native, which is built on a React itself. So by learning React, you're not only learning the front end, you can also learn the developing phone application as well. So it's very handy, and a lot of people are going this way. Angular, I mean, you probably seen it, Indra. Angular is a little bit tough, right? And it's a massive headache. I have a lot of tutorial on Angular as well, if you go into my website. But it's even for me learning Angular was like headache because I have to remember all kind of different syntaxes, and if I don't remember it for like 2 weeks, I forget all of it. React doesn't have all the syntaxes.
It's like a different language. It's not like as JavaScript.
No, but React, it's pure JavaScript, so you will learn a lot. Yeah, and I think if you learn React, I mean, because you can practice the pure JavaScript there, right? So it's more fun that way.
Yeah. Actually, the objective is to learn JavaScript.
Yeah. So if
so any knowledge, experience on JavaScript, so I want to enhance my skills on JS.
Yeah, so I think if you learn React, your JavaScript skill will be super enhanced because you would be using all the JavaScript like spread operators and cloning the objects and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, Hamel. I will look over the tutorials, text it, and I'll start working on React.js for the project.
All right, cool. So yeah, let's do that so we are on the same page. And again, if you want to build 2 projects, one in React, one Angular, feel free to do so. And I'm all open for it. Okay. So
sure.
Yeah. And yeah, last time I had remember you guys, one cloning the array, I mean cloning the object.
Yes.
The syntax was, I think you just do this. I think that was I was doing so if I have an object like this, right? If I'm gonna clone it, I would do something like this. Okay.
So is it like a deep clone or?
It's a shallow clone. Yeah. You would be using a lot this method in React. Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, I'll just wait for my homework, the project, and what we learned today, I'll put those elements inside so you can practice those.
Sure.
All right. Hamel, do we have a discussion form in the classroom, Google Classroom? Because I haven't used Google Classroom earlier.
I was trying to figure out. I could not really I really don't know if there is any discussion forum. But I was looking at another tool called Discuss. Anybody know any good tools on that for discussion? There is a tool called here. I think I didn't see anything. How about you guys? Look through it if you can start a conversation because I did not see any discussion tool here. Yeah, there's like a. It feels like a little bit of minimum setup. It doesn't have much. But I found this called DIS Discuss. I'll try to enroll in this, see if we can start here. Let me try to set this up. Maybe we can use this, and we can also use like a Facebook group or something. That is also really good.
Yes.
Do you want to do that Facebook group?
Anything is fine. I will,
Okay. Okay.
which is comfortable.
Let me try it out. Right. This one, and then I'll send you the link. But yeah,
I think because they have some pricing section there.
In where?
I think this is not a free edition, I guess.
Oh,
there we can see a pricing. It's a call pricing.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
you can purchase this.
Yeah, let me find out. I've never used. Somebody suggested me this one, but I can find out. Yeah, or else I'll just create a Facebook group. Usually I try not to use Facebook, but for this reason, it's a major waste of time.
Or can choose some other source. Yeah, it's better to choose some other resource than Facebook.
Yeah. Okay.
Because you will tend to see, stories.
Yeah.
Okay.
Distracting.
Yeah. I don't even have Facebook on my phone. You know that. I don't do any social.
Even I don't have Facebook.
The only social media I have is YouTube.
There is a pop-up time.
Anyway.
Okay, I'll find something and I'll send you guys. Yeah, so we can actually convert discussion. Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Did we cover like event loop and concurrency model last week?
Which one? Concurrency?
Yeah, event loop and concurrency model.
No. So I'm thinking no, not well. Last week we just touched. I think
right.
somebody had a question on promises. So I think it was you, Indra, or Sesha had it. Yeah. So yeah, so he was using promises at work, and he wanted to. So before we cover the promises, I want to go through the concurrency model. So I'm thinking maybe not next week, because next week I want to cover still the rest of the function, but I think week after that I'll start with the concurrency model, promises, and then async event await, and generators and async events, all that stuff. Okay.
Okay.
That's when we start really getting into the like really deep programming in JavaScript. All right. Okay, guys. All right. So let's talk next Sunday. All right. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Hey, no problem. Have a good weekend.
That's well. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.